I mean, it's what it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, you talked about in the past about your paranormal experiences, and I'm sure we're going to do some interesting stuff in future as well, but I thought I'd just do a paranormal episode with you and talk about our paranormal experiences that we've had together. And
I would love to talk about that, sure.
You talked about a haunted house that you were in, so I'll let you go from there.
It's a haunted apartment. It wasn't a house. I've been in a haunted house before. It wasn't quite as scary, actually. But no, yes, the paranormal, and it's always on the periphery of what we perceive as normal, correct? But there's a whole other world out there other than our own. I think it is our own, but it's just the things that we don't always see. It's on the periphery of your eye. You hear a lot about, in ufology, there are certain things that are kind of similar to the paranormal, and that you hear about shadow people, orbs. You hear a lot about, probably too much about orbs.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to tell whether, did the person see a ghost or did they see a UFO?
Or whether it's in their brain.
Mind's eye. Well, something came into their perception that wasn't perceived as the normal day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
You can go to your corner store and buy a jug of milk and walk home and everything is just normal and fine, or you can go to the corner store and buy a jug of milk and have something strange happen, and it's still a part of your life. It's sort paranormal. I think it's actually the normal, but it's just the stuff that we don't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff like that.
Does freak you out when it happens, though.
Yeah, it's always strange.
Yeah.
Synchronicity plays in ufology. It also plays in the paranormal stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think paranormal and UFO field are linked, but I think there might be some crossover there.
I think there is some crossover. I don't think it's all nuts and bolts. I think that there's certainly a connection between the ethereal and what we perceive as reality. And it's actually all reality.
It might be that they're on the same sort of frequency, or dimension.
It's a dimensional thing, is the way I see it.
If aliens traveled, they might travel through a dimension, which is where this energy level is with the spirits, and it might be that intertwined. But who knows? Maybe the spirits are actually aliens that are mimicking humans. I don't
know. I'm not sure.
Not sure?
I think that, this is what I think. I think that the universe is much greater and broader than we usually perceive it to be. That there's a multiverse that we live in, and it seems that scientists are even copying to this more and more as time goes on. You've got things like Schrodinger's cat, and there's the whole thing about quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
That it works on many levels.
Although it can't be proven.
Well, they can prove that a wave can suddenly look like a particle, depending on what you expect to see.
Well, I think it's actually both.
We can disturb the universe.
Actually, it can be both. It can have a frequency in the particle. I sort of talked about that in the Tesla thing, where it can be rather than looking at it as a sphere, you look at it as a donut, and the frequency is where it's spinning around in a loop inside itself, while it's moving forward through space as a particle. But anyway, it's very out there thinking science, and the connection with ETs passing through matter and coming through walls and lifting people out of the walls and through windows and stuff.
That's paranormal. I mean,
which is still similar to people seeing ghosts walk through walls and stand next to the bed and then disappear, and so it's sort of in that same sort of area as
Arthur Clarke's law. I guess you have the three laws, right? And the one that I always quote is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So sometimes the things that seem like magic to us are just a higher technology than we're privy to. And of course, it's like taking an iPhone and handing it to an Aboriginal. It's magic. There's people talking in this little box. Do they live in there? How are they talking from that? And yes, that's who we are.
There is a good video on YouTube, but I can't seem to pin it, where they meet a Amazon tribe for the first time, and the first time they've seen white people, and they show them their cameras and mirrors, and they're just thinking, wow, this is magic. and they're looking at themselves in the mirror, and they're almost, scared of it. It's quite a good video. I have to see if I can find it for you. And
yeah, you should tag me on that, Paul. Tag me on that. I'd love to see that. I know that we've recently encountered tribes in the Amazon that have not been in touch with the Western civilizations out there, and they throw spears at the helicopters.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
Oh, well, that's because we're constantly synchronized.
Yeah. So you're seeing that tip as well. Okay.
We've proven that synchronicity works through the mass of the Earth, because you're on the other side of the world for me. But we're always syncing on the same ideas and thoughts. And that is a thing for us.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, it does happen a lot with us talking that we come out with exactly the same thing. and text anyway, text chat, because you haven't got time to read what the other's posted before you send yours, and then you look and see what they've said, and it's exactly the same as what you said. It's kind of freaky. But yeah, you talked about, was it a wife or a girlfriend that you were living with that had a painting that kept moving?
My old girlfriend. Her name's Wendy. I haven't asked her if it's okay to share her name with her story. It's probably okay, but...
Well, first name's always okay. First name doesn't relate to anybody.
Yeah. So. This was back in the 1990s, late 1990s, and she had a poltergeist in her house, and I observed it on quite a few occasions. Things would fly off shelves. We'd be in another room, and we'd hear a boom in her family room, and we'd walk out there, and something would be in the middle of the floor that there was no reason for it to have lifted off of the shelf and flown across the room and landed there. This was a thing, and it was a recurring happening.
So you didn't see it happen at the time? You didn't see it happen at the time?
I saw it many times.
You were in the room when it was moving?
I saw it happen once, and that was enough. It would usually happen in the room that we weren't in. We would be in another room, and we would hear noise from the other room, and we would go out there, and something things would fly off shelves. It was very strange. She had a friend who was actually sort of romantic about her, and she wanted him to be a friend. At that time we were an item, and anyhow, this guy was in a very terrible place in his life, and he actually committed suicide.
Okay.
The evening that he committed suicide, she had a strange vision of a burning man standing in her doorway. This I heard about before she got news that this guy had actually pulled the trigger on himself, and that's what he did. He pulled the trigger on himself. But she told me about this. She said, I saw a burning man there. I think it was so-and-so. She mentioned this gentleman's name. He was standing in my doorway, but he was on fire, and it seemed like he was consumed, and then he was suddenly gone. And, and you hear something like that, and you shake your head, and it's like, well, okay, did you smoke anything? Or, it's like, no, I was fine. She apparently was getting ready to go to sleep, and she had this strange sighting. And we kind of, I was interested, and I left it there, and she left it there. As days went by, weird stuff started happening. Things would fly off shelves. And it was her birthday, and I painted a picture of her playing her guitar. And it was, a good-sized picture. I had it framed. It was, under glass and in a kind of a large frame, maybe, 3, using the English system, because we're not metric here in America. They tried to do that, but it was maybe like 2 feet by 3 feet across. It was a good-sized painting. And it was hanging on her wall in her room. And we started talking about weird stuff that had been happening. Her TV had been turning off and on by itself. Lights had been flicking off and on. She had never experienced anything like that before. She didn't have electrical problems. It was a nice house in a nice area. She'd never experienced anything like that. No. And it wasn't paranormal. We were just figuring, well, you need to get an electrician over here to look at things. And then weird stuff would happen where I would wake up when I was over there with, feeling like somebody had been talking to me. And she saw shadow people in her house. It was the proverbial, you're lying there and getting ready to go to sleep, and then you can't sleep because you see some movement in your room, and there's nobody there. And stuff like that kept happening, but it just kept on rolling on, and it came to a peak. When I painted this painting of her playing her guitar, she put it on her wall. I hung it with a museum. We live in the land of earthquakes here, and believe me, I thought about that too in context of this. No earthquakes going on at the time. reason for it to happen. We were talking about her vision of this gentleman in her doorway who was on fire,
Yeah.
And other strange things that had been happening that were along those lines, and the room seemed to fill up with strange kind of energy. It was a negative energy. Neither of us were feeling very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about this, and the room just got heavy.
Did it get cold spots?
I really don't remember the room getting cold. What I remember was that we were talking about it, and it was probably this guy, and the painting flew off of her wall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was a large painting. There was nothing on the other side of the wall. You know, it was an apartment, but there wasn't a neighbor on that side.
So it's on one of those hooks that you have to sort of lift up before it will come off.
It was a museum hook. Yeah. It was earthquake friendly.
There's no way it could fall off naturally.
No, it couldn't have fallen off naturally.
So the people can't understand that. So they think that it has to be earthquake related or whatever.
No, there were no earthquakes. There was nothing.
It's a shame. It's a shame you didn't get it on video, because that would have been really good evidence.
It's before smartphones.
Isn't it always?
Anyway, we weren't thinking about video. We were getting ready to call it a night.
Mm.
But the painting flew off the wall when we were in the conversation, and she mentioned the guy's name. And we had paused in the conversation, and it was almost like somebody coming in and adding their 2 cents to the conversation. The painting just flew off the wall, landed on the ground with a boom. It went a good 6 feet across the room, and it landed face down. How do you explain something like that? I can't explain.
No, you can't.
I tried to, you know. I mean, we weren't into ghosts.
Mm.
You know, we were 2 musicians trying to work the LA music scene. We weren't talking about that stuff. But it sort of came into her life. Now, this is somebody that had a UFO sighting when she was a child as well. I mean, she related a story where she was sitting on the back porch of her parents' house, and she saw a proverbial, like a rod-shaped UFO hovering over her, and she experienced missing time. That was when she was a child. Now, I think that probably
Let's party.
sensitive and empath in some areas. And I know she's a sensitive because she did have ghost encounters before, but I had never witnessed them. I would hear about them. She would say, "Oh, I had somebody that looked like Jesus sitting on the edge of my bed last night." I wasn't afraid. I actually felt comforted, but he was sitting there. You know, I could feel his weight, and I heard the bed springs. It wasn't like it was a specter. It actually affected my bed, and I went to sleep right afterwards. And it's like you can write that stuff off as and that's what I did. I said, well, you were falling asleep. You were sort of in a hypnagogic state. Yeah. But nobody was asleep, and nobody was. We hadn't been drinking anything. We hadn't been smoking anything. We were sitting there. We were talking about the subject when this this painting flew off the wall.
Yeah. And
this was after, she had recently had a cat that she loved that had died, and she had the cat cremated and put in the ashes put in a little box on her shelf. And it flew across the room, and we heard it in the other room. We walked out there, and inexplicably, this box of ashes was sitting in the middle of the room.
Mm-hmm.
It was very strange. There's no way to really explain that except, well, maybe somebody slammed the door really hard. I don't know, But we weren't thinking ghosts. I was certainly not hoping that we were encountering anything like that. And a couple of, and then she had other things that flew off of shelves. And it seemed to get worse and worse until it became a problem. And the problem was, one evening the TV turned off and on, off and on, off and on. And we're sitting there. And we're getting scared. And the next evening is when the...
was it infrared remote controlled TV?
Yeah. There was a remote control TV. We had this is back in the 90s, so...
Scientists would write that off as interference with the IR
I would
detector.
Too, sure. I would write it off as that as well, yes.
But we had homestays in our house and rented out the top of our house, and we had some Chinese people living there. Well, a female with her 2 sons. She was studying English, but they claimed the top of the house was haunted. They used to have the TV switch on and off, just like what you're saying. And I've never ever seen it happen in my life. And they were glad to get out of the top apartment after a while. But I used to have the bedroom below where they used to have their bedroom and the TV set up. And one day I could hear the drawers opening and closing up there, and I thought they were home. And then I asked Mum, are they home upstairs? Because Mum was out shopping. And she says, no.